Hello, my name is John Rose. In this video, I'd like to take a closer look at politics from a raw food, cooked food perspective. Now, it's extremely important whenever we look at anything, we always look at it from a raw food, cooked food perspective. And that's because we're either getting reconnected with raw food or we're getting distracted if we don't correct that mistake and keep eating cooked food. And remember, when we look at politics, when we look at government, when we look at those things that are used to control us, these are subsequent needs from cooking our food. So if we don't cook our food, we won't have those subsequent needs. The solution for a better government is to have better people. We can't fix a system that's sick because the system is filled up with us. None of us are capable of the vast majority of us are not capable of self-governing, so how can we turn around and govern someone else? We can't. It doesn't work. It can never work. And when we look at all the world's greatest civilizations, the average age was only 200 years, and they all went through the same cycles where they start off with bondage. They went from bondage and they went to spiritual truth. From spiritual truth to great courage. From courage to liberty, from liberty to abundance, from abundance to selfishness, from selfishness to complacency, from complacency to apathy, from apathy to dependence, and from dependence back to bondage. And here in America, we're in the dependency stage, and it's by design. You see, in a democracy where we have two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner, a lot of people start figuring out, hey, I can vote this person in here if they promise me money from the treasury. And this is where we're at right now. So the way most people vote right now is they vote for the person who can promise them the most financial reward. Again, this is a subsequent need, or subsequent need for money. You see, all these things that are causing problems are all subsequent needs from eating cooked food. That's why you have to look at everything from a raw food, cooked food perspective. If you're eating cooked food and you're trying to solve a problem, you're never going to solve the problem because you're not going upstream. Now, once we start eating the raw food, there's a lot of things we have to do downstream. Society's been damaged. We've got to understand what's happening now in the role of politics. And remember, politics is derived from the word poly, meaning many, and ticks, meaning blood-sucking parasites. And that's what we got now, isn't it? People who go into politics may go in with good intentions, but they always usually become corrupt. There's only been a few politicians that have been able to avoid that. I was very impressed with Ron Paul and his ability to not be corrupt, but he didn't have a complete picture either of really what the problem was. He didn't understand raw food. So you have to have an understanding of raw food in order to be able to help anybody get out of the cave we're in and get back up to paradise. So we don't need rulers, we need leaders. I had a comment on my channel the other day, and that's a great way to look at it. That's exactly what we need. Is we need to find people who've gone where few have gone, and they got directions. They know how to rise above the ideas of the time, and they got a map, and that's what I've done. That's why I created a map that I know is very intimidating for a lot of people. But if we revisit that map for just a moment and think of my special teaching tool, which uses knowledge in a way that's never been seen before. We're not being taught this knowledge, so it behooves us to learn this. But think of it as a big map, or two maps in one. And to think of a map of the United States, but let's make the map of the United States perfectly rectangle. Now let's imagine that my hands are magic markers and I just came up and pushed along your screen and I am drawing a line out to there and a line up and a line back to here. So now I created a rectangle box. Let's say that's the map of the United States. Well, wait a second, where's Florida? Well, let's just say that's going to be the map. Now let's do it this way. Let's say that we take this map that I drew and we divide it into thirds. Okay? So we have on one side we have the East Coast, on the other side we have the West Coast, and we have the Central region. Now let's try to visualize this a little bit differently by using my arms. Let's say that my arms are the bottom half of this 6-box system. Now imagine my hand. Let me see if make sure my hands are in the picture. See my hands moving? Let's say that they're creating a line. Now put that magic marker back up here again, draw the line over. Now imagine that line is up there. Now here we got my 6-box system. Now my head would be in the central region of this 6-box system. And then over here on this side, this would be the first stage of knowledge, and this would be on the west coast. So what we have on the west coast is in the +8 box of knowledge. Up here in Seattle, let's say, Seattle, Washington, this is where we have a good guy, and we'll say it's Jesus, okay? There's 3 good guys on my map and 3 bad guys. And then down here in San Diego, that's where the devil is, all right? So this is where false knowledge is at. So that's all I've done with my special 6-box system. It's a map. And over here on this half of this section of the 1/3 of this map, again, we have the west coast. And we have Washington up here and California down here. So I could pick cities and give it a piece number and call Seattle piece number 1 and San Diego piece number 2. That's false knowledge. This is the knowledge we need. Do you understand how I'm saying that? So it's really quite simple when you look at it that way. And then on the other side of the map, we've got the East Coast. Down here, up here in New York, let's say we have Gandhi, and down here in Miami we have Hitler. So up here we have paradise. This is where we have positive effects. Down here is where we have all those problems that are within our control. This is where we are in the Dark Ages. Now, I put Hitler down here intentionally because most people think Hitler is a bad guy, but it turns out Gandhi said, I'm not fit to carry that man's water. So we have to understand the rulers of the world have taken the bad guys, Germany and Japan, Hitler and Mussolini, and made them to be the bad guys when they were actually the good guys. The first thing Hitler and Mussolini did when they came into power is they banned Freemasonry. And that's how it backfired. They came back around and slandered them. So we have to sit down before fact when it comes to our history, because what Germany did and what Japan did is they proved to the world that we do live on an abundant planet. But we lose that stage of abundance because we're sick, and we have this sick cycle because we're disconnected. We shouldn't have this cycle. We live on an abundant planet. Germany and Japan proved that to the rest of the world. They were flourishing when the rest of the world was starving because there's a small group of us that are controlling everything. And that's how we end up going through these cycles. And even if they're not all in cahoots, it doesn't matter because we're sick. We're going to have this MO no matter what. That's what psychopaths do. They divide and conquer. You see, that's what politics is all about. Let's go back to politics for a moment. The left and the right, okay? On the far left, we have 100% government. This is where we have socialism and communism and collectivism. I did a video yesterday on collectivism and from a raw food, cooked food perspective, because we always have to look at it from that perspective. On the other end, we have 0% government. That's anarchy. And remember, we can't have anarchy or collectivism in a sick world. Neither one of them work. We shouldn't have this whole left-right paradigm anyway. So false paradigm. Politics is given the illusion of choice. And yes, there is a difference between the left and the right as far as how they look at problems. And if you look at them the way Ken Wilber looked at them, and I'm not saying this is the best way because this is somewhat of a flaw in Ken Wilber's quadrant systems. He made these quadrant systems using inter and extra and individual and collective. And one of my students one time was a big fan of Ken Wilber, and I told him that Ken Wilber's quadrant systems were really meaningless. You got to look at my quadrant system, which I hadn't showed him at that point. And I said, I'm not going to tell you what mistakes he made. Let me see if you can figure it out. And he never did figure it out because this information is kept from us. There's only 2 forms of 2-value logic we need to understand, and that's the cause and effect and pleasure and pain quadrant system, which is part of my 6-box system. So really what you have when you have this map with the 6 boxes, you really have 2 maps in one. So you have on this side right here, you have this quadrant system, you have the central region and the west coast. That would be one map. And then on the other side, you have the central region and the east coast. That's another map. So what I did is I took 2 maps, I interconnected them. There's a 6-box system. So now I already showed you we got Jesus up here in Seattle, and the devil is down here in Miami. San Diego. And up over here we have Gandhi up here in New York, and we have Hitler mistakenly put down in Miami. And then up over here, let's say in If we go straight north, we got to go to something like Bismarck, North Dakota, or Fargo, North Dakota. But people don't know that. We'll just say Chicago is up there. And up there, what do we have? We got Socrates up there in Chicago, or Fargo, or Bismarck, or whatever. Up there in the second stage of knowledge on the right path. And then down in Houston, Texas, we've got Mussolini. So that's all you have to understand in order to understand how to use my 6-box system. There are 3 stages of knowledge. We have to understand that, so that when we talk about something, we know about whether we're talking about the knowledge we need or the actions we need to take, or we got to look at whether or not we're getting the results. If we don't get the results we're looking for, then obviously we got to change what we're doing. And we can't do that unless we change what we know. So the 6-box system is really very simple. If you can play 2 square, you can understand how to use my 6-box system, because it's just a bunch of boxes that connect to one another. There's always 2 boxes connected to one another. It gets a little complicated when you look at what happens with the wormholes, and I understand that's a little challenging. In fact, I only had 4 wormholes initially until I realized I didn't have a place to put where we had false interpretations, and that's when I realized, oh my God, there's 4 more wormholes, and who knows how many more wormholes I might find in the future. But I've been punching holes in this tool of mine I created for a long time, and the purpose of it is to help us understand what I'm talking about. When I'm talking about politics, when I'm talking about collectivism, when we're talking about government, when we're talking about money, what we're really talking about is piece 34 in my special teaching tool. 34 and 35 are the 2 additional temporary needs we have because we made mistakes and now we're damaged. The big mistake, we started eating cooked food. That destroyed the biophotons. That destroyed one of our senses. Now we lost one of our senses. Now we have the wrong mentality. Now we compete for resources on an abundant planet where we should cooperate and share the abundance this planet has to offer. Now we prey systematically on our own species. If humans were like lions in the jungle, you know what we'd go do? We'd go, let me see, we're over here eating the gazelles. Who else are eating the gazelles? Oh, the hyenas are eating the gazelles. Let's go kill the hyenas. And then we'd go, well, let me see, what else can I do? What are these gazelles eating? They're eating grass. What else eats grass? Oh my God, the zebras are eating grass. Let's go kill the zebras. This is how our mentality is. There's something wrong with us. We should not be doing this to ourselves. How can we do it? We're disconnected. That creates a dark side to our behavior. And then the darkest of the dark side of our behavior, the worst of the worst of us, the sickest of the sickest of us, is taking advantage of the fact that we're sick. They're exploiting the sickness in man. And therefore, there's only one solution to overcome this dilemma, and that is to get reconnected. Once again, if we don't get reconnected, everything else is a distraction. The only way to get reconnected is to stop cooking your food, because that's what disconnects us. That's why it's simple. Get connected, get distracted. What are you going to do? Well, if you want to get reconnected, it's not easy to go from where most people are at to where they need to be. That's where the first of my 3-step process comes into play. That's why I have it there, so we can do something on a temporary basis, so we can see what we're missing, and then be in a position to say, hey, it's more than a fair trade. I don't like the government. I don't like the politics. What's the solution for them? Well, the solution is a bottom-up solution, and it has to begin with the individuals. We all play a role, and I've said this 1,000 times, if not 1,000,000 times by now. Things are never going to change unless we reach the tipping point. We've got to get enough of us to do this so that we can change our whole collective mentality. As long as we have the mentality we have right now, we're going to have trouble with government and politics. Remember Sal Alinsky's 3-legged stool analogy, where we have big money, government, and the people. And if the people aren't organized, the other 2 will be, and they'll control us, and that's what's happening. And how they do it? They do it with money. That's why money is the absolute tool of control. With money, they can control the media and the government and the educational systems and everything else that's going to brainwash us to think a certain way and not know what history is all about. You see, the reason why history repeats itself is not because we're stupid. It's because we have sick people who control what we learn, and we never have access to the truth. So history repeats itself because we never really learn the lessons we're meant to learn. What were we supposed to learn from last century? I'll tell you what we're supposed to learn. The government killed, murdered 262 million people during peacetime. That's what the government did for us. 262 million. Can you wrap your brain around that number? That was last century alone. This century is going to be a lot worse. People go, oh, I don't believe this is going to happen, this is going to happen. A lot of people just don't have enough dots to connect. And even if you did, you're not real good at connecting them. So when you don't see something, don't stop trying to put more information in. If you keep going and if you keep reinforcing all the bullshit you've already been taught, you're never going to figure anything out. You got to study the opposite of what you believe. You got to study what someone else is saying when it comes to how to eat, how to live, how to govern ourselves. Democrat, Republican. One thing that really drives me crazy is when one person decides to be a Democrat and they're going to vote that way no matter what. Why? Because that's their ideology and they think they're actually making a difference. It's an illusion of choice. We don't have a choice. It's a false left-right paradigm. Both sides are financed by the same people, so it doesn't matter if they come in and do things one way or these people come in and do things the other way, because everything is sliding more to the left. Everything is sliding more to the left. And again, the only solution is to get reconnected. And when we get reconnected, guess what's going to happen? We won't have governments, so there will be anarchy. And that's what it's all about. We don't need, it's not about having chaos, it's about whether or not we need to have someone ruling over us. And then we'll understand that we're all one with everything, and we'll know that the more we give, the more we will receive. We will live in a collectivism. We will live in collectivism. We will have collectivism and individuality at the same time. There won't be a sacrifice the way it's set up now. The way it's set up now, since the world is sick, we're going to lose our liberties in the name of society. Again, we're sick. And the sickest of us use things to control us. The government is a huge way we're being controlled. Politics is another way we're being controlled. And what we need to do is again, reach the tipping point, get enough of us to bump up our biophotons. What's the fastest way? Well, according to Dr. Pop, a juice fast is the fastest way to bump up the biophotons. And it's simple. You can't consume 20 pounds of produce in one day, but you can juice fruits and vegetables and drink their juices. Keeping in mind that some people are going to struggle with fruit, and we should never drink fruit on an ongoing basis. But when you're on a juice fast, sometimes we got to weigh the pros and cons and think, well, I've really got a lot of crud inside me and I really need to get rid of it, and I can't do it if I drink nothing but vegetables, so let me do 50-50 and see how well I do. Or 90-10, oh, it's got to be all fruit, I can't do it otherwise. Well, you got to weigh the pros and cons. We know the cons of consuming that much fruit juice without any sugar. But then what are the pros? What do we weigh that against? Oh my God, the guy had a 30-pound cesspool and a tumor that was the size of a grapefruit, and they're both gone now. I think that's a fair trade to have the blood sugar elevated momentarily. Keeping in mind that we do this mainly in the beginning, and as you get on your journey of a solid food vacation, the vegetable juices will start tasting sweet, and that's where you want to gravitate toward 100% vegetable juices once you get all cleaned out. We can use the fruit juices because they are also more cleansing. So there's a time and a place. Again, you got to weigh the pros and the cons. What am I getting? What's it costing me? And if you don't have any issues, then you can go for it on a temporary basis. And the reason why we do this on a temporary basis is so we can see what we're missing. And then we'll finally be in a position to say, okay, now I realize that I want the most out of life. I don't want to cook my food anymore. And then that's when this world's going to change. Once we get enough people to do this, we'll reach the tipping point. Things will change so fast, we can't even imagine how things are going to happen. I'm sure it will unfold just the way it needs to be without any effort at all, because everyone's going to be putting their own effort into it, making it happen. They're going to want to do that. That's the beauty about the ultimate solution to solve every problem that's within our control on this planet, is that once we get the momentum going, once we reach the tipping point, it's going to be easy for everyone to do this. And if anyone's struggling at that time, we'll figure out the best solution at that time. So it's best not to project too far in the future about how society is going to change, just like it's not too good to project too far in the future about what we want to do when we're on a solid food vacation. Remember, we want to take it one day at a time and go the distance. And try not to say, well, I know I have to do something on day 35, what do I do? Well, let's make sure you've gone into it long enough to decide whether or not your previous decision was a good decision. Because the point that you have to be aware of is that most people, once they get into the second, third week, they feel so good they don't ever want to eat again. And again, a small percentage of people are going to struggle for various reasons. So we always change as fast as our body will allow us. For most of us, we start with a solid food vacation. That's where a juice fast comes into play. And when you do this, you will have a light bulb moment within a week, and that's because you'll be still eliminating. The average woman loses about 7 pounds, the average man about 10 pounds. Of course, the average man I'm talking about here in America is pretty big. And then within several months, you'll have that aha moment. And that's a lot going to depend upon how sick you were going into this and how long you need to go to overcome that sickness. And the great thing is the body can heal itself if we remove the cause. And for most of us, the major cause is we're not eating the right food. But there are other needs we have to satisfy. So if you're not getting any sunshine, if you're not sleeping, if you're not exercising, if you're not doing the other things we need to do, then obviously you're going to have some sort of feedback to let you know you're making a mistake. So that's what all disease is all about. It's part of our feedback system. And when you go on a solid food vacation, most, if not all, of your disease symptoms are going to disappear. And that's an aha moment. And that's when your biophoton levels get really connected. And that's when you realize you were in for a treat.